Take it away, Tom.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. You guys could have been watching the Oscars, but that means a lot. That means more than you think it does. So we could get started, and I'm going to show you like my early work, and we're just going to go from there. So like my first painting is this painting, and this is like the painting I did in undergrad. Hey, now you're good. So this is like one of the biggest paintings I did in undergrad, and I just want to give you an idea of where I was coming from. So we'll just sort of look at it, alright? I just was interested in a little bit of like capturing dimension, but also trying to be like capturing flat forms in a three-dimensional space, if you could sort of like vibe with that. And I'm just going to keep going. Here's another painting I made like right after undergrad, and sort of along the same lines. This character will sort of fill in like a narrative I'm still working on now, and which is called the Necromancer. And I will show you another painting of that. And this is the earliest version. These two are the earliest versions of that. So just sort of remember that. I'm still working on it currently. Just remember that. And then I'm from New Jersey, so I was like, all right, what am I gonna paint for like a while? But I was still living in my parents' house, painting in like my brother's room, like in the attic. And I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna paint like things around me. This is a painting of the bagel shop around the corner from me. So that is, yeah, that's really that. I sort of jacked that face from like the Miro portrait of himself. And like I'm always trying to sort of like nerd out on like, you know, little art history references, just sort of like to fill in, you know, content for my paintings and my ideas. This is another Necromancer painting. It's getting a little more high tech. I'm starting to use like light and depth, I feel like, a little more. Then I abandoned this, okay? I made this and abandoned it. Forgot about it. Made a painting of me getting arrested in upstate New York with two of my friends. And yeah, you could look at that, that is that. And then I was like, okay, how can I make, so I started making like these flat paintings, but then I threw this little thing in there because I wanted about like the flat shapes in the three-dimensional space. I was thinking of, you know, the painting as being like a diorama. So it's like looking into like a little box. So I just threw this up here to sort of give you an idea of what's going on. And then I made things like this. So I was just trying to create like little habitats. Flat shape with like shadow, like a little drop shadow that goes back. Just trying to give you like that aesthetic. I'll just keep going. These were like sort of on a theme of just like everyday sort of like glimpses of life. Like Mexican restaurant, you know, like 2 in the morning, suburban lifestyle, you know. This is when I still lived in New Jersey. I did Clifton Commons, which is like a movie theater we'd go to all the time. I did Mountain Creek, which is like the ski mountain I would ski at all the time. I did Eagle Rock, which is like the state park we would always like go up and just like hang out in. And then I started to think about like containing these scenes like within a window. I was looking at Matisse at the time. So this is like a little like window frame that sort of inspired me. I sort of kept rolling with it. You'll see like another one here. And then I did my sort of own version of this, and you'll see I really just like jacked like this little like border of the window, and this is my dad in my backyard in my house in New Jersey, like cleaning the pool. And then this is me in my apartment, just sitting on my bed doing nothing. And then this is like, I started to think like, okay, like I could take this frame and really like sort of create like its own scene. It doesn't have to be so like linear and it being like a window. And then this was, I call this like urban environment or something like that. So I sort of ran with that, abandoned it for a second, made this painting, which is really just like an urban landscape. And I'll just keep going for a second. This is another Necromancer painting. It's getting a little more like rendered, a little more advanced. I'll show you guys this. I jacked, like if you could see on the right side from this Bosch painting. It's just in the background. So you can see I was just like nerding out on art history. This is another one, Necromancer narrative. Let's keep going. This is like a little gargoyle I painted. That's the gargoyle from Notre Dame. And then I was like, okay, back to the diorama idea. How's everyone doing? Am I going too fast? Am I losing everyone? Okay, cool. So, good.
Can you talk about the necromancer as a character?
Yes, I can. Yes, I totally should. Okay, so this sort of was like a seed got implanted. Actually, during one of my critiques when I was in college, I was making a bunch of like sci-fi work, and my like senior crit, the guy was pretty much like, yo, why are you doing all this? He's like, you don't have to like stick to sci-fi, you can just do whatever you want. And he's like, you want to like be a wizard, but he's like, you're using a medium that's in conversation with dead artists and like dead people. And it didn't hit me then, but I was like, oh, like a necromancer, which is someone who could like communicate with the dead. But rather than him, you know, like rather than you seeing him in like his like ritual of communicating with the dead, I thought it'd be cool to just see him like sort of looking at like swimsuit magazines, just like rolling around his like abandoned estate. And that's that. So you'll see more of that. So like that's that theme. And I sort of was thinking in this narrative, like in this universe with a diorama, it's like, okay, in this narrative world where it's all like sort of medieval, sort of like, I don't know, I was just thinking like, okay, the world ended, it's like an apocalyptic thing. I'm gonna make a bunch of like dioramas of like what habitats or like nature used to look like, and it's just gonna exist in this guy's estate. So that's what was the narrative I was thinking about. So I made stuff thinking about the Natural History Museum. I'll show you guys like side by side. It sort of started like this. You can see I just like jacked the grizzly bears, made my own little version of that. Did another one, my own little version of that. Just kept rolling with it. Here's some more. And at this point, it's like I wasn't really looking at anything. I just like sort of combined a bunch of just like photos or just like ideas or sketches I like previously had. So it's not a direct reference anymore. Here's another one. I'll just keep going through. Another one.
Can you go a bit slower?
Of course. So yeah, definitely I'm interested in the frame, sort of like back there when you saw Matisse. Very much thinking about, and this is like a problem I have, and it's like sort of a security blanket for me right now. It's like I'm afraid to let go of the frame in the painting. So it's like it's hard for me to sort of just have an image that's cropped off without it being conscious of the fact that it's on a square. If that makes sense, I'm not sure, but that like you could see me sort of working through this. Here's another one, same type of deal. This is the necromancer, and I was like, okay, now how could I bring this back? Not just like these dioramas of landscapes, but how can I actually, you know, try to put together the frame sort of aesthetic into the narrative, and that's like how this came along. And there he is there with his little swimsuit mag. And just related to Labyrinth, I was thinking like, the necromancer is pretty much the god. This is like a scene from Labyrinth, and he pretty much just is like, I don't know if the last time you guys seen that movie, but he pretty much just is the Goblin King, like just alone. He has no like little Muppets. There's no little, you know, Jennifer Connelly's not in there. He's just alone, and he's, you know, watching swimsuit magazines, reading swimsuit magazines, and it's, you know, sort of sad for him. And then we got this little thing here. Started to go a little past the frame, but I was still like hugging onto it a little bit. I thought maybe it'd be cool if the frame just sort of went back into the actual material. So like I didn't really render, like you could see the top, you could still see the brush strokes. I was sort of playing with like, okay, how can I render the frame so it's not so obvious that it's like a brick window? Like what happened if it like sort of has a push and pull between the material and the image like that's represented. Here is another one. Here is another one. And then this is, I think, the most recent necromancer painting I made, and it's still sort of the same idea. I just got way trapped into like, okay, I'm gonna render everything like way hard right now, and that is that. And the little fountain, the little like guy coming out of the cauldron, I sort of ripped from this Albrecht Dürer woodcut, and you can see he's that guy on the right. And then, yeah, just like a little reference. And that's like what I do in my studio. I'll just like look for references and be like, oh, that looks cool, I'll throw that in there, I'll throw that. And then it's like, I made this like big castle painting, sort of just thinking within like the same sort of narrative. I left like the window out, but I still really wanted to contain everything within the frame. So it's a little bit of the opposite without it being like a window. It's just like sort of sky that sort of cuts off this painting or frames this painting. And then just, I have a few more references I could show you guys. Yeah, another Albrecht Dürer like cut, like a little fountain in the front. I don't know if you could tell, but it's like down front in the center. Like a little hippopotamus like sculpture from like ancient Egypt, threw it in there. Did a red castle with it. I sort of wanted these to be shown like together. You know, it's cool. This was another little like relief I did. So I'm still definitely thinking about the window frame. I really want to try to give the illusion of like space and like dimensionality. And that is that. I'll just keep going. So this actually, oh no, sorry, next one. So I went to the Cloisters Museum like over the summer, took a bunch of pictures. I was like, oh, I really like this, and then I sort of turned it into this painting. And that is the last painting I did, so I sort of abandoned like the actual window frame of the whole thing, but I'm still like very conscious of trying to trap it in the painting. And that is the end of my slideshow. So I don't know if I moved way too fast, but if you guys want to talk about anything, I'm totally down. Or ask me questions, it's totally cool. Yes, hey.
Hi, I have a question. Can you talk about the choices to bathe the space in complete colors? Like, I'm just curious, like, what you're thinking about when you're wanting to have something be completely blue or completely red, or the relationship with light and color to the spaces that you're building.
Okay, so I feel like the work I used to make, I'll go like all the way back. The work I used to make was like super, just like I would try to use like every fucking color, you know, like, you know, like the first one in undergrad, it was like neat, you know, it's like a lime green, like the whole thing is lime green, and I was just like, I don't know, I sort of like became more conscious, and like I felt like less is more for my work, like developing with color. And I wanted these paintings to be shown, like when I was thinking of it, I wanted them to be shown together. So I wasn't thinking like, oh, for that blue castle painting.
Rip through it.
I wanted, I'm sorry. I hope no one has epilepsy. Shit. Alright, so anyway. I got it.
So good.
Anyway, I wanted this to be like, all these paintings sort of be different colors and like shown next to each other. So I'm still like into color, but I sort of just chose the blue because I wanted it to like give you a definite like, you know, feeling, to sort of invoke like, you know, some type of nostalgia, like nighttime, like bright blue moon, you know, showing light. The red one, I was thinking primary colors. I was thinking I was gonna do a yellow one. I just sort of got stuck. Like, I was like, yo, I'm not gonna paint bricks for like a few months after doing these two paintings. It sucked. Like, painting the bricks sucked. And that was that. And yeah, so I was like pretty much like trying to tone down my color palette. And in these painting, I'll show you like this last little window painting I did. It's not really in chronological order. Like, these are the last two window paintings I did. And this one, I used to just paint with just like color out of the tube, and never really, I would like make colors and then like forget how I made them and then just feel like, oh shit, like the whole painting is gonna like not correlate anymore. So this was the first painting where I actually made a color palette, like figured out all the colors and then wrote them down and then stuck to it. And this is what came of that. So like I feel like this is the most considered sort of color palette painting I have right now. The other ones I more or less like winged it a little bit, besides like the blue castle, the red castle. I knew I wanted like one main color. But this was like, okay, I'm just gonna stick to the script and like see how, you know, sort of like a like sort of dark orange that looks like on white will actually look, you know, like a light orange juxtaposed to a whatever color you're putting it next to. So I sort of got off on that like aspect of you know, creating a painting.
Any additional questions?
I have another question.
Yeah.
You guys first. You guys first.
So there's something kind of digital about the environments you rendered. I don't know, did you grow up playing video games?
I did play a lot of video games. I definitely played like, you know, World of Warcraft. I was into that whole thing. I'm not like I don't like necessarily reference it, like I'm not thinking about it when I make it, but I'm definitely into like the perspective, like the sort of RPG game sort of take where it's like, you know, sort of a bird's eye view, not really like totally up, but like it's like sort of on an angle. And that's how I sort of am thinking about moving through this narrative. Like you just have a mouse and you could just like scroll, you know? And that is like the sort of, that's like sort of what I want my paintings to like give off, is that it like is in conversation with like 2000 era video games.
Tom?
Well,
Call microphone.
I mean, I got a few questions, but I can't remember what about the necromancer. I'm really interested in him. Can you just remind me and us where that came from? Where he?
So this guy, it was a pretty tough crit, and I just left, and he was like, "You want to communicate with the dead? You want to be a wizard?" He was pretty much like getting on me for like not really referencing any other artists, or like just because when I was in college, I really didn't look at too much art, and I sort of just stuck with like, you know, my video games, and like I like Star Wars, so I just like painted shit like that. And then like this sort of opened it up, like, okay, I just thought of it real literally. I'm like, I'm gonna make a figure that is gonna communicate with the dead, but I thought it'd be, you know, better that he looks like we just see him in like his off time, you know. And I feel, you know, it's a little bit of what I'm sort of into like what you expect versus like what actually is. So I sort of like that it's underwhelming, that he's just looking, you know, he's not like trying to summon like a dark army, he's just alone. And
so do you think you were kind of taking the piss out of your lecturer a little bit in that? Because it's funny. What you've done. It's funny, it's comical, and do you think you were kind of sticking your fingers up at him a little bit?
A little bit, for sure.
And do you think it's sort of a bit of a self-portrait?
For sure. Yeah. Definitely.
Can you elaborate?
I definitely relate. I definitely can relate to it. I hope everyone can sort of relate to that, you know.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I definitely relate to it because it's like I feel like it talks about a lot about procrastination, not really like living up to what like people think you're doing, and yeah, sort of like an isolated. Not to get like emo, but you know, just like the loneliness of like creating, like being a painter or like creating art. You know, it's a little isolating at times, and I sort of threw like whatever feelings I had that I could relate to that into that narrative, and in like a funny way. Like I don't want it to be serious. I don't want it to be like, you know, any heavy. I don't want it to be heavy. So I hope it's like sort of a light, humored thing.
Yeah. It's very successful. I think like there's another thing. I don't know if this is a question. Bear with me, especially everyone in this room. Bear with me. I'm just kind of just thinking aloud here. But there's some. I don't know if anyone's seen these in person, but there's a lot of that you can see the edge of that painting. There's a lot of texture. It's not perfectly square, and it's almost like it's a object. Well, it's an object in itself.